Sex and violence. This is the question. This is the topic that we have for the night. And what we're really going to get into on this podcast is pornography addiction, how to stop pornography addiction, all the stigmatism around sexual fantasies, triple X fantasies, all those different things that really weave our way into guilt, shame, confusion, and thinking poorly about ourselves. How can we get past that? How can we live sexually healthy? And how can we be a guy that's confident about who we are and what our sexuality is? That's what we're talking about on today's TSL podcast. Subscribe, listen in. And if you're a fan of anything that we're saying, or even want to know more about just different stuff, don't forget to subscribe to the Daily Awesome podcast. We put out a podcast a day, 5 days a week, and also the TSL podcast, this podcast. And of course, you can find stuff all on the free stuff linked down below on how to get involved in our communities and really better your lives, because that's what we do. In fact, this is on our community call. It is up, got to check the date. Sorry about that. August 9th, and we're on our TSL online call. It's 9:05 p.m. We're probably going to be on for a few more hours. We're a badass community of guys that just gets together and talks about how to be a better man. So this question of sex and violence came up, and it's a pretty important topic, and a topic that I love, mainly because my sex life started out in violence, and it's been such a conflict of mine that I'm at very much peace with these days. And the question is that he was watching a movie the other day, and he saw there was a rape scene in it where somebody was being assaulted, and he got turned on, and he felt terrible about it. He had guilt about it, and he said it just made him feel that much more not normal about his sexuality. And see, the thing is that these are very common to have this sort of fantasy. And we also need to realize that the fantasy is much different than the reality. And to dive into why all that happens, man, it's a complex thing. But the first and foremost thing that we got to realize is that this is normal. Having this sort of fantasy or being turned on by an act of violence, whether it's sexual or not, and feeling an arousal about it, man, don't feel bad about it. That does not mean that you are somebody that is going to do that. That does not mean that you are somebody that is only turned on by those things. That doesn't mean that when you're actually having sex that you have to do those things. It's very much like we go throughout our day with different fleeting thoughts that we probably should talk about more of. The road rage. We want to kill somebody. We want revenge. We want to attack somebody. And over time, those thoughts change and process and lessen. When we can't express them, they turn into bigger things and seep out in all these different ways throughout our life. And it's really, really a terrible and unhealthy thing. So when it comes to our sex and sexuality, why is this a big deal? Why is it happening? Well, we hear over and over again from different things like, in feminism, or we hear it in the men's rights groups of how, rape or as a part of a female's personality or how it's such a wrong thing to go out and catcall somebody. And we hear all these rules about what's right and what's wrong about sexuality. See, the thing is we stop seeing sex as a biological function of us that has drivers that go far, far beyond what our society has built. This doesn't mean that those drivers told us to violently hurt people and attack people all the time. Those drivers were there for us to connect and procreate and have insane amounts of pleasure from sex. And a lot of it was aggressive. A lot of it may have felt or seemed violent. And a lot of it had a big urge behind it to go and take somebody and to feel powerful, or to cause submission, or to cause a sense of ownership and different feelings in it. But it was within this realm and this feeling of sex that we had that passed after that. The interesting thing is we don't have any outlets for those drivers in our normal sexual expression in our lives today. In fact, in society, that would be seen as bad. In fact, we don't talk about sex much in our society. We don't talk about it really at all unless we're trying to sell something or exaggerate something or, shine our lights and get some sort of attention for it. But we don't talk about the actual human experience of sex. And all those things happen, and they're extremely common. To feel that we're dominant, to feel that we're powerful, to feel that we're taking somebody, or to feel that we're submitting, or to feel that we're giving completely in to that one person's expression of their sexuality. These are all components of sex. These are all components of the masculine and the feminine. And if we actually take the actual literal sexes of the masculine and feminine out of a society or out of a group, like let's say, if there's a group of women, that are isolated on a village, that group will start to divide with different masculine traits and different feminine traits. We can't escape these different things. If we join a men's group, or we see this even in our society, we hear every men's group complain about this. It's like, oh, we were given, throughout the 90s or the early thousands, all these, pussy heroes. We need real men and warriors. Well, the thing is what happened is our masculine environments in our society got so isolated that they naturally divided. And the men started acting more like women, and the women started acting more like men. And now we can't fucking figure it out. And now there's all these rules about what's right and wrong. And that if we think about sex in a certain way, or if we watch pornography, or if we get involved with certain things that are, taboo in our culture, then that must mean we're doomed, or we're screwed, or society doesn't accept us. And then we have to rebel, and we have to join this group or these groups of people that are really extreme in their ideas, that are probably wrong about a lot of their things, but they're right about the thing that's painful about us. So when it comes down to sex and violence, when it comes down to how we express those things, the best thing we can do is it be normal. Now, how do I get to this, and how do I know that this is the answer, is not just because it worked in myself, and not just because it worked in a few people, but with our program with TSL, we've done this over and over again, where we did the pornography experience. We always hear about porn addiction. I talk about it at my 21 convention speech in Miami that at this date, on August 9th, 2017, has not been released yet. But we talk about how we set up in different groups of men, and we watched pornography. We enjoyed it. We allowed ourselves to. If we were in, these were people who had sex addiction problems. These were people who, had basically big problems with porn at one point in their life. And these were also people that felt okay about it. All right. So we committed to watching pornography and as much as we could. And so for me, that was at least 2 hours a day. For other people, that was even more. For other people, it was less, but everybody has a different threshold of it. And then we talk about what we watched. And what was interesting is, even as open as I am and as open as other people are in that group, we didn't really feel comfortable talking about a lot of the intricacies of the different porn we watched. Some of it was violent, some of it was shaming, some of it was belittling, some of it was belittling to the male, some to the female, and so on. All these weird things, right? All these weird things that are so outside of our normal day-to-day personality. And when we normalized them and talked about them and made them something that we were very comfortable with, the shame came out. Now, I believe that, and there's some arguments within our subgroups on this, of our TSO groups, is that sex is a very, by nature, private thing. It's something that we don't talk about all the time with everybody. And whenever we do it, like an act like masturbation or an act of sex with somebody, is very, very intimate, and it's personal by nature. That means that when we go through that experience, it's very difficult for us to express it to somebody or to articulate even what we're feeling. And because of that, like some other instances, like let's say the feeling of love, the feeling of winning. These are also very hard to articulate, but they're easy for us to articulate them. Now, I believe in multiple different societies and different groupings of people, because we are in a very unique situation in how we live now. It's not how we evolved. It's very far from that. But I believe in multiple different cultures before we became really established as a society, that we still felt that privacy around sex. We always see that there's such an intimate cherishing about it. Now, some societies, like if you take the Arawaks who were in the Caribbean, or if you take the Caribs who were in the Caribbean, they had sex in very different ways. The Arawaks had sex with everybody. It was free. People didn't have all these rules around it, or I'm sure they did have some rules that the Spaniards didn't really understand before they killed them all. And the Caribs had a totally different tradition and ritual wrapped around sex, and also very different flavors. I mean, the Caribs were super violent. They practiced cannibalism and all sorts of other things. And that the Arawaks were very peaceful and didn't live in that way. But the interesting thing is none of these people took that violence or that sex to the way that we take it today. We take our violence and our sex, two different things, in an extreme in so many different ways with what we're expressing our feelings with. And that's a really, really sad thing. If you look at the history of war, if you look at the history of even totalitarianism, it didn't start until we were able to get large populations and build governments and teams and all this sort of stuff to attack people. It's really, really, really a sad thing. So let's look at this. We can be sexual. We can explore our sexuality. We can have so much of that equate to what we see as violence, but that doesn't necessarily carry over in our day-to-day life. when we are too quiet about it, when we think that we at our core are abnormal, we build up shame and guilt that may have been there to begin with because sex is a very private thing and it exaggerates. And then we start having double lives. We can't figure out what's the real us and what's the actual sexual expression. And then we start doing things like having a relationship with our wife, but then trolling for hookers somewhere or jerking off to porn and thinking that we're, these mixing of things. The real thing is that we're an expression of all these things. We need to let them out and let them out properly. If you want to know how to do that, join our communities. Man, you can't just get it all from a podcast. But of course, if you're happy listening to the podcast, I enjoy you. I love you. It's awesome, man. Give us some love, stars, likes on iTunes or Stitcher, all those things, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and all that sort of good stuff. But man, it's so important to actually work these problems out with men because our sexuality is so quiet, complex, and repressed that we need to be active with it and bounce it off other people that are going through some of the same stuff. I mean, look at this. We have money, our careers, our marriages, our divorces, our first times we're hooking up with somebody, our, in this specific situation, being able to watch a movie and then get turned on and then feeling kind of bad about it, not knowing where to go. You need people to help be around you who've experienced a lot and who may be going through the same things with you to really give you a perspective on you, being proud of that and sharing it with the world. In any case, if you like this sort of thing, subscribe to our YouTube channel, press that button, get involved with us because we put out good stuff and we're currently making some awesome webinars for you. And of course, you can watch our different playlists that we have for our Daily Awesome or our TSL podcast, or you can watch our different vlogs and videos on all sorts of many topics about men's development that just totally fucking kick ass, and I know you're gonna love. So cool stuff. Leave a comment, leave a like, leave a dislike. I don't mind. Let's interact and let's talk because that should be the real value of what we're getting at rather than this world of a digital age and all this separation where we're so densely packed yet so disconnected. Let's get out there and connect. Steve Mayeda signing off. We'll talk to you guys soon.